It was the smell that woke up Mrs. Lorraine Jefferson. Thick, choking smoke filled her lungs as she sat up in bed, coughing violently. She turned to shake her husband, Henry, but the heat was already unbearable. Flames licked at the wooden walls of their small home in Yazoo City, Mississippi. The old house, built generations ago, was dry as kindling, burning faster than she could comprehend. Screams echoed through the house. "The kids!" Lorraine's mind screamed as she threw herself out of bed, her bare feet scorching against the hot wooden floor. She reached for the doorknob, but the metal seared her skin. With a ragged cry, she turned, searching for another way out. Across the hall, the bedroom door of her eldest daughter, Janelle, was engulfed in flames. Her other children, 6 in total, were trapped inside their rooms. The fire roared louder, a beast devouring everything in its path. Lorraine knew she had seconds. The last thing she heard before the flames took her was the sound of sirens in the distance. Detective Samuel Sam Carter leaned against his old Chevy, taking a long drag from his cigarette. The fire had been put out, but the damage was absolute. What once was the Jefferson family home was now a blackened skeleton, still smoking in the crisp morning air. The bodies of Henry, Lorraine, and their 6 children had been removed, their remains barely recognizable. Sam had seen house fires before, but something about this one gnawed at him. The blaze had been too intense, too deliberate, and the way the fire spread, it didn't look accidental. "Got something, Detective?" Sam turned to see Officer James Riley approaching, his boots crunching over the burnt debris. Riley was young, eager, and still had that shine in his eyes that most cops lost after a few years. "What's the word from the fire department?" Sam asked, flicking his cigarette onto the ground and crushing it under his boot. "Preliminary report says accelerant was used. Looks like arson," Riley said grimly. Sam sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He had a feeling. Fires like this didn't just happen, not to entire families in the middle of the night. "Any witnesses?" Sam asked. "Couple of neighbors called it in, but nobody saw anything," Riley said. "We're checking nearby security cameras, but this is the country. Not many people have them." Sam crouched near the front porch, running his fingers over the charred remains of what was once a welcome mat. His eyes landed on something half buried in the ashes, a melted plastic container. "Evidence bag," he ordered, holding up his find. Riley quickly passed him one. Sam carefully placed the remains of the container inside, studying it closely. The shape was familiar. "Lighter fluid," he muttered. Riley's eyes widened. "So this wasn't an accident. Somebody wanted them dead." Sam nodded. "And not just dead, erased." Yazoo City was a small town, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody. That meant the killer was someone local, someone familiar with the Jeffersons. Sam had been working homicide for years, and he knew one thing. Murder was almost always personal. He pulled out his notepad, flipping to a fresh page. "Let's start with the basics. Who would want them dead?" Riley hesitated before answering. "Henry Jefferson was a respected man in town, worked at the post office. Lorraine was a homemaker. They had no known enemies." Sam wasn't convinced. People don't burn entire families alive without a damn good reason. He stared at the house again, feeling the weight of the crime settle over him. This wasn't just murder. This was something much, much darker. Detective Sam Carter sat in his dimly lit office at the Yazoo County Sheriff's Department, flipping through the preliminary reports. 8 victims, all burned beyond recognition. The fire chief's findings confirmed what he already suspected. This was no accident. The killer had used an accelerant, likely lighter fluid, to ensure the entire house went up in flames. The brutality of it all disturbed him. Why would someone kill an entire family this way? Who hated the Jeffersons enough to burn them alive? He took a sip of his now cold coffee, exhaling sharply. This wasn't just about murder. It was about making sure there were no survivors, no witnesses. Someone had something to hide. Yazoo City was a quiet town. Crimes here were usually small-time. Bar fights, petty theft, the occasional domestic dispute. But this was the kind of crime that sent ripples through a community. Sam and Officer Riley drove through the neighborhood, stopping by the Jeffersons' neighbors. They knocked on doors, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything suspicious the night of the fire. Most people gave the same answer. No, detective. We didn't see nothing. We just woke up and saw the house burning. It was the same story over and over. Sam wasn't buying it. But then, an old woman named Miss Thelma, who lived 2 houses down, hesitated when he asked if she'd seen anything. She was in her late 70s, her hands trembling as she held her Bible close to her chest. I don't want no trouble, detective, she muttered. Miss Thelma, anything you tell me stays between us for now, Sam assured her. She sighed, glancing at her front door as if making sure no one was listening. I heard someone walking outside real late, she finally admitted. Real slow, like they didn't want to be heard. I peeked out my curtain, but it was too dark to see clear. I swear I saw someone near their porch. Sam leaned in. Man or woman? Couldn't tell, she said, shaking her head. But they were big. Broad shoulders, heavy steps. Like a man, maybe. Sam scribbled down notes. Anything else? A car, maybe? Miss Thelma nodded hesitantly. Heard a car engine turn over. Sounded like a truck, maybe an old one. Not too far from the Jeffersons' house. Sam exchanged a glance with Riley. It wasn't much, but it was something. Back at the sheriff's department, Sam pulled up the Jefferson family's history. Henry and Lorraine had been married for 15 years. Their eldest, Janelle, was 14. The youngest, Malik, had just turned 2. He checked the coroner's report. The fire had done its damage, but DNA testing could still be done. Sam decided to run full profiles on all the children. Maybe it wouldn't tell them who the killer was, but he had a hunch, one he couldn't explain yet. 2 days later, the results came in, and what they revealed sent a chill down his spine. Each of the 6 Jefferson children had a different father. That wasn't unusual on its own. Lorraine could have had multiple relationships before settling down with Henry. But when Sam checked the father's DNA markers, something didn't add up. Because all of them, every single one, were related. And worse, 3 of them shared DNA with the same person, a local cop. Sam sat frozen, staring at the report. Officer Brent Hollis, a well-respected police officer, a man who had served Yazoo City for over 20 years. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a reputation as a family man. But his DNA was all over the Jefferson case in ways that made Sam's stomach turn. Hollis wasn't just connected to one of the kids. He was connected to 3 of them. Sam checked the other results. 2 of the other fathers were also related to Hollis, his brother and his father. The final child's father, Brent's own son. The implications hit Sam like a gut punch. Lorraine Jefferson's 6 children had been fathered by her husband's father, brother, son, and a fellow police officer. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something much, much worse. And someone had burned them all to the ground to keep it buried. Sam rubbed his temples, his heartbeat hammering. There was no way this was a coincidence. Someone in the Hollis family had to know. And someone had decided to make sure no one else ever found out. He pulled out his phone and dialed Riley. Meet me at the station, Sam said. We need to bring in Brent Hollis. There was silence on the other end before Riley spoke. You sure about that? I'm damn sure, Sam said. And be careful. If he knows we're onto him, he might run. But what Sam didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the fire was just the beginning, and Brent Hollis had no intention of going down quietly. Detective Sam Carter sat in the interrogation room, his hands clasped tightly together. Across from him, Officer Brent Hollis leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, but his body language told a different story. His fingers drummed against his biceps, a nervous tic Sam had seen before in Guilty Men. Hollis had come in voluntarily, but Sam knew better than to mistake that for innocence. You want to tell me why I'm here, Carter? Hollis asked, his voice level. Sam slid a file across the table, flipping it open to reveal the DNA report. He watched for a reaction. You know the Jefferson family? Sam asked. Hollis glanced at the file but didn't touch it. Of course I do. Everyone in town knew them. Sam nodded. Did you know Lorraine Jefferson personally? Hollis's jaw tightened slightly. What are you getting at? I'm asking if you knew her personally, Sam repeated. Hollis exhaled sharply. Yeah, I knew her. A long time ago. Before she married Henry. Sam, leaned forward. How well did you know her? Hollis didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped. We had a thing, all right, but that was before she got married. Sam nodded slowly. You ever see her after that? Hollis hesitated. Ran into her here and there. Nothing serious. Sam slid another paper forward. The DNA results. Brent, we ran some tests. Hollis's eyes flickered over the paper. These are Lorraine's children, Sam continued, and you're connected to 3 of them. Hollis went still. Sam didn't let up. Not just you, your brother, your father, and your son. All of you fathered her children. Hollis's fingers stopped drumming. Sam pressed on. You see what I'm saying, Brent? This isn't just bad luck. This is a pattern. And now that entire family is dead. Hollis's face darkened. His breathing changed, his chest rising and falling faster. You think I did that? I think someone in your family had a damn good reason to get rid of them. Hollis slammed a fist on the table, making the metal legs rattle. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I know someone in your family was sleeping with Lorraine, Sam shot back. I know that the kids, those innocent kids, were caught in whatever twisted mess y'all had going on. And I know someone wanted to bury the truth. Hollis's hands clenched into fists. His face was red now, veins bulging at his temple. I didn't kill them. But you know who did, Sam said, locking eyes with him. Silence. Then for the first time, Hollis looked away. 2 hours later, Sam walked out of the interrogation room, his mind racing. Hollis hadn't confessed, but his reaction had told him everything he needed to know. The man was hiding something. As soon as Sam stepped into the hallway, Sheriff Daniels was waiting for him, arms crossed. We got a problem, Carter, Daniels said. What now? Daniels pulled him into his office and shut the door. I just got a call from the mayor and from the state police. They want you off this case. Sam stiffened. Excuse me? Daniels exhaled. They're saying you're pushing too hard, stirring up things that don't need stirring. Sam scoffed. You mean they don't want the truth coming out? Daniels leaned in. You don't get it, Sam. The Hollis family? They ain't just some backwoods folks. Brent's daddy, Robert Hollis, used to be the police chief. His brother Larry runs the biggest trucking company in town. And his son Nathan, he's about to graduate from the academy. Sam shook his head. So what? That means they get to walk free? Daniel's voice was low. It means you're stepping on dangerous ground. Sam clenched his jaw. So what do you want me to do? Just drop it? Daniel sighed, rubbing his face. But be careful. If this thing goes the way I think it's gonna go, there ain't no saving this town from the fallout. Sam nodded, but he'd already made his decision. He wasn't dropping a damn thing. The next morning, Sam sat in his car outside the Jeffersons' burned-down home. The smell of charred wood still lingered in the air. His phone buzzed. It was Riley. Sam, you're going to want to see this, she said. I found something on the surveillance cameras. Sam drove to the station and found Riley hunched over a monitor. She pointed at the screen. Camera from the gas station, 2 blocks from the Jefferson house. Look at the timestamp, just an hour before the fire. Sam watched as a grainy black and white image flickered on the screen. A truck pulled up to the pump. An older model dented on the sides. The driver stepped out. It was Brent Hollis. And in the passenger seat, his father, Robert Hollis. Sam's heart pounded. We got him. Riley shook her head. Not so fast. Look what happens next. On the screen, the 2 men exchanged words. Then Robert Hollis shoved Brent hard. Brent staggered back, hands raised. Robert got back in the truck and sped off. Riley paused the video. Something happened that night, Sam. Brent wasn't in control. Sam frowned. Then where did his father go? Riley hesitated. That's the thing. Robert Hollis's truck was found this morning. Sam narrowed his eyes. Where? Abandoned on the outskirts of town. She swallowed. And there was blood inside. Sam grabbed his coat. If Robert Hollis had been killed, that meant one thing. Someone was cleaning up loose ends, and Sam was running out of time to stop them. The crime scene was on the outskirts of town, where the road turned to gravel and the woods swallowed the landscape whole. Detective Sam Carter pulled up next to the abandoned truck, its rusted body blending into the dim morning light. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, and the scent of iron and gasoline filled the air. Riley stood a few feet away, her arms crossed. Deputies found it at dawn, she said. Blood on the seat, a half-smoked, cigarette in the ashtray, but no Robert Hollis. Sam peered inside. Dried blood stained the worn leather seats, but not enough to suggest a fatal wound. Someone had been injured, but they'd still been able to move. Or had they been moved? Any sign of struggle? Sam asked. Riley shook her head. No shell casings, no footprints leading away. It's like he just vanished. Sam stepped back and scanned the tree line. The woods stretched for miles, and if Robert had been taken somewhere, the body could be anywhere. We need dogs, he muttered. Riley nodded. Already called them in. Sam turned back to the truck, his mind racing. Check this, he said, pointing at the ignition. Keys are missing. Riley frowned. So whoever left the truck took them. Or Robert took off on foot. But why leave his truck out here? Riley asked. And why now, right when we're closing in on the family's secrets? Sam didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. Robert Hollis knew something, and if he wasn't already dead, someone was trying to make sure he would be. Back at the station, Sam sat at his desk, staring at the caseboard. Photos of the Jefferson family, Brent Hollis and Robert Hollis, were pinned in a chaotic web. DNA results were scattered across the table. Then something clicked. He grabbed his phone and dialed the county clerk's office. I need birth records for Lorraine Jefferson's kids. 30 minutes later, the fax machine whirred to life. Sam grabbed the pages and scanned them. His stomach twisted. Each of Lorraine's 6 children had been fathered by a different man, except 2. 2 of the boys shared the same father, and that father wasn't Brent. It was Robert Hollis. Sam exhaled. Jesus Christ. Riley, who had been watching from across the room, stepped closer. What? Sam tapped the paper. Brent's father was sleeping with Lorraine, too. One of his kids was actually his brother. Riley's eyes widened. And Brent just found out. Sam nodded. We need to find Robert before someone else does. Sam drove to the Hollis family home, a large farmhouse on the outskirts of town. It was a relic of old Mississippi wealth. Peeling white paint, a wraparound porch, and a barn that hadn't been used in decades. The place was too quiet. Gun drawn, Sam stepped onto the porch. The door was slightly open. Riley followed behind him, moving cautiously. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else. Something metallic. Blood. Sam moved toward the kitchen, where a single chair was overturned. On the table, a half-eaten meal sat untouched. A plate of cornbread and ham. Then he saw it, a trail of blood leading down the hall. Sam followed it, heart pounding. It ended at a locked door. He tried the knob. It didn't budge. Riley, he whispered. She nodded and stepped back. With one swift kick, Sam busted the door open. Inside was a nightmare. Robert Hollis was tied to a chair, blood dripping from a wound on his head. His shirt was stained red, and his breathing was shallow. Standing over him, holding a hunting rifle, was Brent Hollis. His hands were shaking. His face was twisted in rage and sorrow. Brent, Sam said slowly, put the gun down. Brent's eyes flickered to Sam, then back to his father. Did you know? He demanded. His voice was raw, filled with years of suppressed rage. Robert groaned, barely conscious. Brent stepped closer. Did you know they were your kids? That you... His voice broke. That you made me raise my own brothers? Robert wheezed. Shut up, Brent shouted. He pointed the gun at Robert's head. Sam took a slow step forward. Brent, listen to me. Killing him won't fix this. Brent's jaw clenched. It won't fix anything. Then don't do it, Sam urged. You want justice? This isn't it. This is just another body, another secret buried. Brent's hands trembled. For a moment, Sam thought he might pull the trigger. Then Brent closed his eyes, exhaled, and dropped the gun. The sound of sirens filled the air. Riley moved in and secured the rifle. Sam stepped forward and grabbed Brent's wrist, pulling him away from his father. Brent didn't resist. He just stood there, staring at the blood on his hands. Robert Hollis survived but was in critical condition. The investigation uncovered decades of abuse, infidelity, and corruption within the Hollis family. Brent was charged with attempted murder, but his confession led to deeper revelations. His father had orchestrated the fire to cover up the truth, thinking he could bury his sins. And the sins were deep. The Jefferson family had been targeted, not just out of rage, but out of desperation. Robert knew the DNA results would destroy him, and he was willing to do anything to keep his legacy intact. But the truth had a way of surfacing. As Sam sat in his office, staring at the case files, he knew one thing for certain. Justice in Mississippi didn't come easy, but this time, it came. The town of Brookhaven, Mississippi, had seen its share of darkness, but nothing compared to the horror hidden within the Hollis family. Detective Sam Carter sat in the dim glow of his office, staring at the crime board. The pieces were scattered, but the picture was forming. The DNA test had exposed generations of incest and betrayal. Brent Hollis had nearly killed his own father, and Robert Hollis, still clinging to life in a hospital bed, had set the fire that killed his own family, trying to bury the truth forever. But something still didn't fit. Robert had been willing to kill to protect his secret. So why leave behind the DNA results? Why not destroy them? Sam ran his fingers through his graying hair. He was missing something. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Riley stepped in, her expression grim. "You need to see this," she said, holding up a manila folder. Sam took it, flipping it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter. "I know what you did, and soon so will everyone else." There was no signature, no date. Sam's pulse quickened. "Where was this found?" Riley hesitated. "Inside the Hollis house, in the bedroom of Brent's mother, Lorraine." Sam's stomach twisted. Lorraine had died in the fire, one of the many victims of Robert's desperate attempt to silence the truth. Had she known? Had she planned to expose Robert before she died? Sam exhaled. "We need to talk to Brent." Brent Hollis sat in an interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the table. The rage that had fueled him in his father's house had drained, leaving behind an empty shell of a man. Sam sat across from him, sliding the letter onto the table. "Do you know who wrote this?" Brent barely glanced at it. "No." Sam studied him. "Your mother had it in her room. If she knew the truth about your father, why didn't she leave?" Brent let out a bitter laugh. "Where was she gonna go, detective? She had 6 kids, no job, and no family willing to take her in." His eyes darkened. "She was stuck, just like the rest of us." Sam tapped the letter. "She wasn't stuck. She was planning to expose him." Brent's jaw tightened. "She was going to end this," Sam continued, "but she never got the chance." Brent's hands clenched into fists. "Tell me the truth, Brent," Sam pressed. "Did you kill her?" Brent's head snapped up. "What?" Sam held his gaze. "Did you kill your mother before your father burned the house down?" Brent's face twisted in fury. "I would never—" He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. "She was the only good thing in my life." "Then who did?" Sam asked. Brent swallowed hard. "I don't know." Sam leaned forward. "But you have an idea, don't you?" Brent hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." The Hollis estate was sealed off, but Sam had clearance. He walked the burned remains of the house, stepping carefully over the charred debris. Lorraine's room was destroyed, the walls blackened, the furniture unrecognizable. But there was something else. The fire had been started in the living room. So why had Lorraine died in her bedroom? Unless she was already dead before the fire started. Sam's gut twisted. If Brent was telling the truth, then Lorraine wasn't just a victim of Robert's arson. Someone else had killed her before the flames ever touched her skin. Someone who knew what she was about to do. Sam turned sharply. There was one person who had access to the Hollis house that night. Someone everyone had overlooked. Someone who had just as much to lose. Sheriff Douglas Hadley sat behind his desk, sipping his coffee. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished. He was a man who had spent 30 years upholding the law in Brookhaven, and now he was about to fall. Sam walked in, placing a file on his desk. "We need to talk." Hadley raised a brow. "About what?" Sam slid a photo forward. It was a picture of him, standing outside the Hollis house the night before the fire. Hadley's face remained neutral. "So? You were there," Sam said. "The night Lorraine died. Hadley took another sip of coffee. I check on a lot of people, Carter. Sam leaned forward. Before she died, Lorraine planned to expose Robert, and you knew. Hadley's eyes flickered. She was going to tell everyone what he did, Sam continued. And if that happened, she would have dragged you down with him. Hadley's fingers twitched. Because you weren't just his friend, were you? Sam said quietly. You were in on it. Silence filled the room. Then Hadley exhaled. You got proof? Sam slid another paper across the desk. Lorraine's medical records. He tapped a line. She had bruises on her wrists weeks before the fire. Someone was trying to shut her up. Hadley's jaw clenched. Sam gave a small nod. And now I know who. Hadley sighed. You're a hell of a detective, Carter. Sam stood. And you're under arrest. Hadley didn't fight. He just placed his hands on the desk and let Sam cuff him. The town of Brookhaven had lost its sheriff that day, but it had found justice. The arrest of Sheriff Douglas Hadley sent shockwaves through Brookhaven. A man sworn to protect and serve had, in truth, been complicit in one of the darkest crimes the town had ever seen. Detective Sam Carter had seen corruption before, but this was different. This wasn't just about power, it was about secrets, and Hadley still wasn't telling the whole truth. Inside the interrogation room, Hadley sat slumped in his chair, his hands cuffed to the table. He hadn't asked for a lawyer, hadn't even fought back. Sam sat across from him, watching. So, Sam said finally, tell me how it started. Hadley let out a tired chuckle. You already know. I want to hear it from you. Hadley exhaled. Robert Hollis and I grew up together. We were friends, brothers even, but he had a darkness in him. Something wasn't right with that man. He used to talk about how bloodlines should stay pure. Thought he was some kind of goddamn king. Sam stayed quiet, letting him talk. I should have stopped him, Hadley muttered. Years ago, but I didn't. And by the time I really saw what was happening, it was too late. He looked up at Sam. Lorraine. She was the only one who stood against him. She wanted out. She told me she was going to the state police. His voice dropped. I knew if she did, everything would unravel. Robert, me, the whole damn town. Sam's jaw tightened. So you killed her. Hadley swallowed hard. I didn't have a choice. Sam's voice was cold. There's always a choice. Hadley's face hardened. Not when you've spent 30 years covering up a monster's sins. Sam studied him. And yet, you let Robert burn the house down? You let him kill his own children? Hadley's gaze flickered, and Sam saw it. The hesitation. He leaned forward. That wasn't your plan, was it? Hadley's silence was answer enough. Riley burst into Sam's office later that evening, breathless. We got the forensic report back from the Hollis house, she said, slapping the folder onto his desk. And you're not going to believe this. Sam flipped it open. The fire hadn't started in the living room. It had started in two places, the kitchen and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. That meant two people had been involved. Sam's heart pounded. Robert didn't do this alone. Riley nodded grimly. No, he didn't. There was still another killer out there. Sam drove back to the hospital where Robert Hollis was still recovering under police guard. He walked into the room, watching as the old man lay there, connected to machines that beeped steadily. Robert's eyes flicked toward him, dull and empty. Sam pulled up a chair. You didn't set that fire, did you? Robert didn't answer. Sam leaned closer. Someone else helped you. Someone who wanted your family dead just as much as you did. Robert's breathing hitched slightly, a small crack in his stone-faced exterior. Sam pressed. Who was it? Robert let out a dry, wheezing laugh. You'll never prove it. Sam's stomach twisted. He knew exactly what that meant. There was still one more Hollis left unaccounted for, and they were still out there. Brookhaven had always been a town of secrets, but none as dark as this. Sam Carter had spent years chasing down killers, unraveling conspiracies, and exposing the hidden sins of men in power. But this case, this family, was unlike anything he had ever seen. The fire that burned the Hollis family alive was not the work of just one man, and now Sam knew exactly who the second killer was. Riley stormed into Sam's office, slamming a file onto his desk. "You were right," she said breathlessly. "DNA test just came back." Sam opened the folder and scanned the page. The blood found near the back door of the burned-down Hollis house belonged to Earl Hollis, Robert's youngest son. Earl had vanished after the fire. No one in town had seen him since, and now the evidence confirmed it. He had been there that night, and he had helped set the fire. Sam grabbed his coat. "We need to find him." The search for Earl led Sam and Riley to an abandoned cabin deep in the woods outside town. They approached cautiously, guns drawn. Inside, the cabin was trashed. Bottles, cigarette butts, and a blood-stained rag lay on the floor. Earl had been here, recently. Then Sam saw it. A photo pinned to the wall with a knife. A photo of Sam. Next to it, in red ink, someone had written, "You should have stayed out of it." A twig snapped outside. Sam spun just as a figure burst through the trees. Earl Hollis. He was filthy, his eyes wild with desperation. His hands were shaking, but the gun he held was steady. "You ruined everything," Earl snarled.